We need a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll approve the agenda. Make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, Mrs. Jones, would you call roll, please?
Mr. Alvis,
Yes.
Mr. Fletcher,
Yes?
Mr. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Guppy.
Yes. All right, now we'll have our report from our school board student representatives.
I'm Carly Keeney, and I'm excited to be one of the school board student representatives. I'm a junior, and I'm on the varsity volleyball, soccer, and forensics team at Virginia High. I'm the president and media manager of Spirit Squad, and I'm also an active member in the World Languages Club and prom committee. I love my cat, Stella, and I especially love studying criminal justice.
Last month, HOSA Club gave out pink ducks and ribbons to raise breast cancer awareness at Virginia High School. Approximately 400 ducks and 200 ribbons were given out to students. Last month, Scholastic Bowl team traveled to Gate City to compete in the Legion Memorial Invitational Tournament. The team won 7 out of 8 rounds and placed second overall. They also qualified to compete in the National SWATA Tournament. Our homecoming queen and princess were Sarah Page and Bella McLeod.
We are also proud to announce that Alicia Royds was also rewarded as our #1 Bearcat fan and beloved student. Virginia High School win against Richlands High School in our homecoming game. We beat Richlands 48-12 and have had a great season so far. Go Bearcats! We also had our annual homecoming door competition. Every year, our school's teachers decorate their door for their upcoming homecoming game, and this year's winners were both Mrs. Campbell and Mrs. Wilson's classes. We also had our VHS football teacher appreciation. Elijah Burks, number 24, gave his jersey to Miss Hartley, and Eli Osborne, number 69, gave it to Mr. Wade.
For Spirit Week, we had, of course, our theme days for students to come to school, with Decades Day on Monday, Rhyme Without Reason Tuesday, PJ Day, of course, Adam Sandler Day, which I had a little bit of joy with, and Character Day on Friday. Is that all?
That's all.
Any comment for that? I think you do a great job. Thank you for what you do. All right, Dr. Scott, are you ready with the superintendent's report?
Thank you, and good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. At this time of year, we are busily training, and all of our elementary teachers have at least gone through the first installment of their Letters 1 training. And tomorrow, we have some PD lined up. Our middle school teachers will be beginning their modules for the Science of Reading training also. And our high school teachers will be doing some professional development with trauma-informed care. So even though it is a day when the students are not in session, we are putting that day to good use to do some training with our staff. In terms of family engagement and parent resources, at the last board meeting, we hired Ms. I know how to say it. Aaliyah. There we go. I don't, seeing it written down threw me off. Miss Aaliyah Yuri, and she's in the back. And she is excited to join us. She's going to be working as our family engagement coordinator. So she'll be working with our principals, specifically with Mr. Rader and Mr. Blackburn, to help improve our capacity to reach our families. She has planned or has been working with the planning of the first 2 nights for that. So November 7th and November 14th, we'll be having events at the intermediate school to work with our families and to teach them some of the things about what we're doing with reading and mathematics this year. I also want to call attention to our Parent Resource Center, which is being run by Jenny Setting. The Parent Resource Center operates out of this building here at Central Office, and is intended to be a support for our families with students with disabilities and students suspected of having disabilities. So these two resources, even though they are separate entities, they have a common purpose, and that's about trying to engage our families, and particularly engaging those families who have historically been the ones that have a harder time accessing resources at our schools. So good news on that front. With attendance after the first 9 weeks, we have some good news to report. We've tallied up some of the perfect attendance students and so forth, and at Virginia Primary School, we had 80 students in the first 9 weeks who had 3 or fewer absences. That's 3 absences in the first 3 months of school. It is a safe range to be in, and we had 80 of those students hitting that mark. At Virginia Intermediate, we had 86 students with perfect attendance. So very pleased that's a large group of students to start out the year with perfect attendance, and I hope to see that number stay as high as 86 for the rest of the year. At the middle school, in a close second place, they had 79 students with perfect attendance through the first 9 weeks. And at the high school, there were 80 students with fewer than 2 absences, so with 0 or 1 absences, 80 students. So attendance is one of our goals for the year, and one of the things that I said to the board over the summer was our strategy last year had been one that involved knocking on a lot of doors and making a lot of phone calls and doing everything we could from a compliance standpoint to make sure that we were having meetings with parents when students reach certain thresholds with their non-attendance. All of that is still in place, but one of the things that we were trying to emphasize even more this year is incentivizing that good behavior. So our partners in community and schools have worked very closely with our administrators and our staff members to make sure that the students had some really great opportunities for incentives for having positive attendance. I met one young man at the football game on Friday night who he brought home a bike for having perfect attendance. So in his telling me that, he also suckered me into buying him a slushie. So he had a pretty good day for having perfect attendance. Some of the other work around our departments, to try to be brief with this, all of our departments are working on the things that you might expect this time of year. The finance department is working on the budget and onboarding Ms. Kim Bowers, welcoming her back. We hired her last month. The Human Resources Department, in addition to helping our other departments get a few more interviews lined up and employees situated, they are making preparations for the employee wellness event. Mrs. Hudson does the lion's share of this work and has already confirmed that we'll have 23 or more vendors at the event this year. In technology, Mr. Jeff Shelton, our Chief Technology Officer, has been working on a grant for ballistic films in our school as part of a continuous effort to add security to our buildings. At the intermediate school and primary school, we're also working on getting the school pass system up and running, and that is a system where we have tag readers in place to help us get the student lined up with the parent to help ease the traffic situation there. At our middle school, we have completed the construction of the secure vestibule there, so we are in the process of transitioning between what had historically been known as the main entrance there on Euclid Avenue, and we're moving it up the road a little bit, one entryway. But we have provided a secure entrance there that allows the attendance clerks to be the first to greet people there. There's also a secure door so that visitors don't have free access to the building when they come in. In the world of transportation and athletics with Mr. Brad Harper, we have 4 drivers in training right now, and we're hopeful to get to the point where as we bring these drivers on, that will ease some of the congestion that we have right now with all the buses hitting the road at the same time. And I know that that's resulting right now in some wonky dismissals at the intermediate school and in the primary school, but some of the things that we could not anticipate over the summer and as we were budgeting and forecasting what our needs would be as far as drivers and buses and so forth, just with some of the congestion there and the sites for our off-site after-school daycare programs has been a little challenging to say the least, but we're hoping that the addition of some personnel will help. Mr. Harper has also been working on the Arby's contract, and we're expecting that to come in the ballpark of about $200,000 for a 3 to 4 year package. So that's money that will enhance that basketball tournament, but we will also be the beneficiaries of hosting that by some of the upgrades that Arby's is committed to making for our facility. And they've promised to be great partners on other things, so I've asked Mr. Harper to help tee up some other needs that we might have in the future. Our boys and girls cross-country teams are going to be competing, and Brad, I want to make sure I have my note right here, but competing at regionals at UVA Wise on Wednesday. Is that correct? Winter sports will begin on November 11th for the high school, and in your packet you will have 2 requests for overnight field trips. One of those is for a cross-country event on November 16th and an indoor track meet that will be happening in early December. Mr. Harper, Mr. Fletcher, you will be happy to know this. Mr. Harper is also in the process of getting some quotes for the cracks in the tennis court. So we are trying to see some movement on that. And that brings us to our federal programs. In addition to the family engagement aspect of federal programs, I have tasked Dr. Faith Mabe, along with Mr. Gary Ritchie, on being the architects for our Virginia literacy plan. And the early returns on that are kind of what we expected. There are 225 students who will have reading plans developed for them, and that is indicative of their needing intensive remediation. And those numbers are large but manageable. And we, not unlike other school divisions around us, are seeing that the highest number of that is in second grade. So we will be getting some targeted assistance with that, and our reading specialists will be working with teachers to implement those plans and have the teachers and interventionists working together. And this is where all those things start to tie together, making sure that our reading specialists and our teachers and our families are all intimately aware of what's going on with their child's reading. Here in a moment, we will have a video to show kind of what reading instruction looks like right now, but I do want to check off a couple other things before we get to that. We have, Dr. Mabe has also assured me that the monitoring for our Virginia preschool initiative has been completed, and we passed that with flying colors. So as we knew for a long time under the direction of Mrs. Jennifer Hurt, our pre-K program is in great shape, and that will continue with Dr. Mabe. And with that, I will turn now, Ms. Austin, if you would cue up this video. I'd like you to watch this video, and then if there are questions afterwards, we can direct those to Dr. Mabe. But this will give you an idea in just a few minutes of what reading instruction is looking like in our classrooms right now.
do your turn. Say the remaining sound and the rest of the sound. You heard the rest of the word. Your sound. And you are going to tell me the word. Okay? So, start with you. Okay? My word is oath. Good. Can you make two sounds? Make them two sounds. Say. Good. Okay, Bella, ready? Ow. Good. You say two sounds. Good. Okay, Deborah, your word is ish. Good. Make some two sounds. Good. For today's read aloud, it comes from a country called Egypt. And it came many, many years ago, so it's about more than the time of Egypt. I see it. You see it? So here's France. This is where Cinderella came from. And Egypt is right here. So this is the country. Okay? So we see our country is over here. You know our country is over here. We are reading this story today to learn about fairy tales. We're going to see how this fairy tale is different from Cinderella and see how this fairy tale is the same as Cinderella. Yeah, it's just like France. This is the place we can go to if we travel to Egypt.
Now, I know if we just showed you that without context, that may have looked a little odd to some of you, but one of the things that if you have a young student at home right now, you probably see them tapping out syllables or using their arm to tap out certain words. Before I stray too far from my expertise lane, and I'll bring Dr. Mabe up to the podium here, but one of the things that we are very encouraged by is with the use of the high-quality instructional materials. Our teachers have at their fingertips already all the resources. They have all a lot of the lesson planning in front of them there to help tie, like as you saw in that example with the fairy tale from Egypt and the fairy tale from France, to try to make those connections. So even though there is a ton of time being committed towards reading and to do it in a very specific way, the reading materials are very inclusive of other subject areas. And so it makes it an immersive kind of situation for our students. And so there's a lot of great resources being used in the classroom. And one of the things that we're seeing already is the way that those resources help teachers keep all students in that section, so that we're not having to pull multiple students out to receive services somewhere else, but they're in the classroom learning from a teacher who is receiving the, bar none, the top of the line professional development for the reading. So, Dr. Mabe, if you would join us here if there are any questions.
So our brains are not pre-wired for reading skills. We are pre-wired for picking up language. It's a natural thing just from exposure, but the skills that you need to become a reader are not pre-wired in your brain. So the science of reading has taken over 4 to 5 decades of research about reading and about how the brain, what the brain needs to do in order to be able to read and to write. Those are not naturally neural pathways that we have in our brain. So our brains aren't pre-wired to translate those letters into sounds. So what you saw on the video was practice for those children to translate sounds and to manipulate those phonemes. And what we hope to establish is that automaticity that is so important for students to be fluent as they begin to read. So we start these skills even without text. We just start them to form those neural pathways so that it's not a cognitive overload that they're having to do each time they read. It's a natural process for them because they form that pathway. And the brain has that pathway when they start to see the text and start to read. And that's what you saw with our earliest learners, our kindergartners, and our first grade students. Anyone have questions?
I like how they do these sounds, and then they slide it all together to make the word. I've heard students do that.
Just like, I mean, it's, you know, when you think about training early, I mean, it's kind of like training for anything. It's muscle repetition and muscle memory, and so it's kind of brain muscle memory is what that is. But I think it's a neat concept, neat idea, and good to see it in action.
And I loved being in there during the knowledge section where they were comparing the fairy tales from different countries, and the way the students were pairing up and discussing it and talking about similarities and just really doing the thinking behind the reading, which is sometimes hard to get to if you're just practicing with a level reader and there's not a lot of rich content. Also learning about the world around them as they learn about those stories. They were excited, they were engaged. I was really excited to see it.
Looks really neat.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Babe.
That it for that? Would you like to continue now with the cell
Sure,
phone?
I will. Last month, we mentioned that the cell phone policy, the regulations for the policy would be back before the board, and our timeline to work in accordance with the governor's executive order is that I wanted to present a recommendation to you this evening and give you a month to think about that and then bring it back, excuse me, to bring it back as an action item next month. Board action isn't necessarily required to revise a regulation, but I think board input is always important. So as a starting place for this discussion, I want to remind the board, excuse me, that last year we brought the cell phone policy out and put it on the table, and that the reason for that was we were dealing with a lot of teacher frustration over how distracted students were in the classroom and how cell phones were inhibiting good instruction. And we were trying to solve that problem, the problem of a disruptive element in the classroom. And when we framed the problem that way, the solution that we came up with was one where we tried to increase the distance between the student and the distraction during instructional times. And it took 3 board meetings and several meetings with stakeholders and feedback from parents and students and faculty members and administrators and so forth. And what we came up with was a system where students during class time are supposed to have the cell phone in their book bags, and the book bags are to be a few feet away from them so that there's not that dependency on it or that reaching in and trying to sneak a text message here and there or look at, scroll through TikTok or whatever might be the case. And last year, the returns on this were pretty good. We outlined and specified what the consequences would be when there are violations. For instance, with a first violation, that the student was asked to turn the phone over and would get it back at the end of the day. There would be contact with the parent. On a second violation, the student would have in-school suspension and asked to turn the phone over, and the parent would have to come pick up the phone at the end of the day on the second violation. And then a third violation would carry a suspension with it. Where the executive order changes this a little bit is that, I think as I said in the last meeting, the governor is trying to, has framed the problem of cell phones slightly differently and is looking at the mental health aspect of it, not so much the distraction that cell phones cause in the classroom. And so with that in mind, the notion behind the executive order is to really restrict students' ability to have cell phones during the school day. And one of the terms that you hear very often in this discussion or in this space is a bell-to-bell cell phone policy, which means that from the time the student gets to school, and that's where there's some definitions that have to happen, and the time the student leaves the school, in between those two times, the students do not have access to their cell phone. Now, one of the things that hasn't gotten a lot of attention in the governor's executive order is a sentence or two that says that there should be some age-appropriate considerations made. And so the proposed regulation does say that there are, it is a bell-to-bell policy with limited age-appropriate considerations. In general, our plan is to have cell phones off and out of sight during the school day. But that looks different for different schools and different ages of students. So for instance, understanding that there may be a fourth grade student who, one, owns a cell phone, and two, whose parent wants him to have a cell phone, and three, who may need to use that cell phone at some point in that child's day, between the time the child goes off to school and before the child's back for dinner. In that situation, we're going to, in the proposal here, it says that a parent would have to provide written permission to the school and say that my child is allowed to have a cell phone, but with the understanding that that cell phone would have to stay off and stay out of sight, and that it should not become apparent that that student even has a cell phone during our school day. There's no reason for an elementary student to have a phone during the school day or at the school or on the bus. So that would be a very restricted number of students who would have a cell phone even in their possession at the elementary school. At the middle school, because our students ride the bus with high school students, I don't think it would be very practical to say that a middle school student cannot have a cell phone on the bus, but a high school student can. So for middle school students, the restrictions would say that a student can have a cell phone on a bus as long as they're not being a bad citizen with a cell phone. So, we don't want students to record any audio or video of any other person on the bus, or to be loud or to be a distraction to the bus driver. But if a student is simply using the phone, to scroll through TikTok, as I mentioned earlier, or parent wants that student to have the phone so that they can check Life 360 or some similar app and see where their student is, I think that's all well and good. But when a middle school student gets off the bus or is getting ready to come into the school, the phones need to be powered off and put in their book bags so that they are not tempted to use them during the day. And then they would stay there until the very end of the school day. When they're going back to get on the bus, they could power them on, have them back in their possession. So we're trying to set up a system where the student is not, between classes or in class even, having access to the phone and doing potentially mischievous things there. At the high school, we've broadened those acceptable uses just a little bit to say that high school students, their day, there's a bell that rings at 8:33 to send them to their first period class, and a bell that rings at 8:40 to say this is when class starts. So at the high school, what we would be talking about is students can use their cell phones until that second bell, that 8:40 bell, and when instruction starts, that should be the last time that we see cell phones, with the exception of allowing them to use them at lunch. Now, in hearing what parents have asked to some extent about being able to send a message to your kid, being able, these are high school age students, a lot of them drive, giving them that opportunity to check their phones for messages or to send mom and dad an update to say, my after-school activity got canceled, whatever the case might be. I think limited use at lunchtime in the cafeteria area is acceptable. But there's also a line in the regulation that says that any time that an adult who is supervising students feels that it is appropriate to let them use their phone, if there's some sort of event that is happening or some sort of unforeseen change to the schedule, we trust our administrators and our teachers to make that kind of game day decision. And if there's I hate to say a qualifying event, but if there's good reason I think that we'll use common sense and allow students to have access to their phone at that time. Some of the general prohibitions that we wanted to spell out is to make sure that students know that it would be a violation to have your phone in a time or place where it's restricted. Using the phone during a test, exam, or any kind of hands-on learning experience would be prohibited. Using the cell phone when you go into an in-school suspension setting or a restroom or a locker room, that's all bad news. The unauthorized recording, audio or video of any person or setting. Certainly there are times when students have in the past used videos appropriately as part of a class project. We're not saying that cannot happen. What we're saying is we don't want a lot of amateur videographers out there getting unsuspecting people on video. And obviously we don't want cell phones to be used to communicate any messages of hatred, to be used to instigate, promote, or portray any act of violence, harass students in any way, or antagonize students or staff members. And lastly, to use cell phones to falsify any kind of record or identity or to tamper with school accounts in any way. So it's not an exhaustive list, but I think that we're talking a little bit about the citizenship that we want to see with cell phone use when it is allowed. As for consequences, the central office staff and I have talked about what consequences would look like. And I think that this is, again, is a bit of a balancing act. But on a first offense, if a cell phone appears where a cell phone should not appear or it becomes known, we would be asking teachers to, and I'm sorry, I just caught Wilson's eyes over there, but if it was Wilson who had the violation, to say, Wilson, that's a violation, to make him aware. And then I have a responsibility to tell a school administrator, hey, Wilson had this violation. Let's get it documented and let's make sure that we call home and let them know that this happened. So we'd make a reasonable attempt to call home. He keeps his phone, but he's got one strike on him. And then the next time, if it happens, someone else catches him and says, Wilson, this is a violation, and they report it to the administrator. He's now got 2 strikes on him. He still keeps his phone, but we also assess him at the equivalent of a day of in-school suspension, as long as when he's going to in-school suspension, he complies with the policy, turns his phone off, puts it in his bag. So for the first 2 violations, the student is allowed to keep his phone as long as he complies. On the second time, he's going into in-school suspension. On the third strike, what we would do differently is we are going to purchase some bank bags that have the zipper and the lock. And when a student has a third offense, sorry, Wilson, just for consistency's sake, we're staying with you here. So Wilson has had this third offense, and we're going to say, okay, Wilson, you have to come to ISS, and we're going to put your phone in this bag and zip it up and lock it, and that bag is going to stay right there on your desk for you, but you're going to be suspended also. I think that's in there. Let me double check, make sure I'm not remembering something that wasn't. Excuse me. We're not going to be suspending them. We're going to say that bag will stay locked until you have finished your time in ISS. Then when you're done, we'll hand it back to you. On any subsequent violation of that, we would suspend the student. Now, what we found to be important and what was, I think, changing the calculus on this last year when we changed the regulation was having the parents be part of the process to come in and pick up the phone. We're not asking parents to come in and pick up the phone. We're hoping that when we communicate with them and say, your child is now at the point where he's going to in-school suspension because his phone keeps being a problem, that the parents will continue to partner with us to talk to their youngsters and say, you know, that enough is enough, we need to stop doing this. And if we get to the point where 3 violations was not enough, then unfortunately we're going to have to suspend students for that. But I hope that anyone who is seeing this or reading this for themselves understands that our intention is to keep students in school and to not let a cell phone violation be a reason that a student is missing class time or missing instruction or missing any assignments. Unfortunately, as we get tested, we have to be able to follow through. And so if there are continuous violations, we have to continue to ratchet up the consequences with those. The paper or the regulation that I've given there does not spell out any definitions, and this is something that we're still working on, but whether a watch, a smart watch is the same as a smartphone and so forth. Quite simply, I've always believed that a phone is a phone and a watch is a watch until a watch is used as a phone. We'll try to think of a professional way of stating that, but we are not trying to handcuff our students in any way or to punish them for this. What we're trying to do is to create an environment where they are having those positive interactions. They are not as reliant on the world that's inside that rectangle all the time. And so hopefully with these guidelines, we won't see the distractions in class, and we will have a healthier student body. Do you have any questions about that, Madam Chair?
Say the deal about the watch again.
So with my, I believe to be average size adult thumbs, I can't do very much as far as texting goes on my watch. Now, the watches have a lot of smart capabilities on them, but there are also things that, health benefits that I think that the watches have. And until, in my mind, until a student is using their watch as a replacement for their phone to do all the things that we don't want them to do on their phone, the watch isn't a problem. Now, if there's strong opposition to that, I'm certainly willing to rethink that.
I mean, I text on my watch, you know.
You are more nimble than I am.
I mean, it's difficult, I mean, and do the voice text on it
Yeah,
as
that's
well.
true.
So, I mean, I think it ought to be in the language, you know, in my opinion. I mean, because it's going to happen. I mean, you just well put it there to begin with.
Noted.
I mean, that's my thoughts. I don't know what everyone else thinks, but
I totally agree. I've got a friend that talks on the phone and texts from his watch, and it irks me sometimes. But yeah, I don't see why that's not included also.
Okay. We can certainly add definitions to include those.
You can even make set up responses, preset responses. All you have to do is touch a button. Yes, I'll be there, or whatever.
I mean, I think in my mind, I mean, the thought is to, you know, we want our students' minds on what's going on in the classroom, and if they got an ability just to give a one-word response or whatever, I mean, it's a distraction. I mean, when my watch vibrates on my wrist, I'm just, you know, I'm like that, seeing what's going on and respond when I can. So,
Is not the earbud things, are they, I mean, we just had a big deal at work in our office with those, the same way.
Right. And what I'd like to do is to get some more input from our principals on what, you know, how rampant that use is. I know feedback from one administrator was we want to make sure that whatever we come up with is something that we can enforce. It does very little to have an aggressive policy if we can't enforce in the same measure. And so I think trying to catch all, but making sure that we can do it in a way that it is enforceable is going to be important.
and I guess my other question is, when we revised our policy last year, how many offenders did we have? I mean, was it?
These numbers are, I would not say that they're the gospel, but they're pretty representative of what the numbers were like. It was between 35 and 40 that had a first violation, and then for each subsequent violation, it was about cut in half. So there were maybe 20 that had a second violation, and then as few as 5 to 10 that even had a third violation. So we did see that there were some who tested whether or not we were going to go through with it or not, and they found out that yes, we're committed to enforcing this. And I think just anecdotally from a couple other school divisions I've talked to, they've seen the same thing, that students are very good at when they know where the line is. You might have a small percentage who test it, but by and large, most of them will walk up to that line and know where it's there particularly if you're willing to enforce it and not cave on everything. So I think that if we message this correctly and are clear with our students, that we're going to see most students comply with this from the word go.
Very timely.
I was thinking too.
Sorry, I can't concentrate.
I need the four of you to talk to my parents because they can't figure out how to use their watch or their phone, and I'm tech support for them all the time.
That's my mother. Call. Any other discussion? Got anything else that you wanted to say about that?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right, the next item on the agenda is public comment. And at this time, we do not have anyone who wishes to address the board that's filled out a request slip. Was there anyone here who might have a comment? All right, then we shall move on. The consent agenda is next on our list. To approve payment of bills and minutes. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Jones?
Mr. Allen.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Next item is under action items for the approval of the 2024-2025 school board budget revision number 2. Info on that?
Yes, I can give you a little bit, but Mrs. Jones is ready to answer anything that I can't. But from our original budget to budget revision number 2, what we're showing here is some insurance recoveries and that money being put back into maintenance. We also have some restructuring with the additional bus drivers and a maintenance position, and some changes regarding employees who are adding family insurance. We also have a van trailer purchase that is reflected in this, and our bus purchases. Right now, we are with our last budget. We approved, as we were proposing the budget, we proposed the buying or the purchasing of 2 school buses. Just with delays that we're having from the manufacturer, that's money that won't actually be expended during this budget cycle. So that is also reflected in here. But those, I think did I state that correctly, Mrs. Jones? Okay. We are still waiting for those buses. And so they will hopefully be here in February, and Mr. Harper will have them on the road as soon as they're here. But that's the information I have for the revisions.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mrs. Jones, for that hard work that you do to keep up with our budget.
Have a great day.
I'll make a motion to approve the budget revision.
Second.
Okay, Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
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 Next item is to move on into closed session. So, Mr. Fletcher, if you would read us into that, please.
Pursuant to Section 2.23711A1 of the Code of Virginia, I move that the board convene a closed meeting for the purpose of discussing the following matters. Discussion of certain personnel.
Second.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes. I appreciate your interest and your attendance in our meeting tonight. Okay, Mr. Fletcher, would you read us back in, please?
Surely. The Bristol, Virginia School Board certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting, and only such public matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were considered.
Second.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Any other old or new business? Then the meeting is adjourned.